Hey y'all, a7RIII here, and I wanted to post a video regarding the Sony a7R3 after using the Sony a7 III for many months. Now, the R obviously stands for resolution, so the Sony a7R3 uses the same lens as the Sony E-mount full-frame lenses, but instead of being 24 megapixel, it's 42 megapixel. So most of the stuff that I do is video related. But I wanted to talk about the things that I immediately noticed that were different between the a7R3 and the a7 III. So first of all, the thing that I noticed on the little selector where you can switch among shutter priority, aperture priority, movie mode, etc. That dial has a little thing you got to push down before it'll turn, so it kind of locks in place. That seems kind of silly to me because I've never encountered a situation while I was filming or snapping photos that my a7 III kicked to another mode. But nevertheless, that's a difference. Also on the side, you've got the little jack. I think it's, what is it, SDI or whatever. You don't have that on the a7 III. And the biggest difference that I noticed, well, it's gotten windy. The biggest difference that I noticed between the a7R3 and the a7 III is the little LCD on the back. The LCD on the back of the a7R3, and by the way, I'm using that camera to film this video. Expand this video's description and then click the link there. You can find the microphone I'm using, the tripod, the lens, and obviously the a7R3 camera body. But yeah, the LCD on the back noticeably sharper. You know, it's a lot easier when I'm taking photographs, especially if I'm kicked into manual mode and I'm using focus peaking. I can really see how well or how poorly things are focused. Not that I had a problem with the a7 III. I found that to be perfectly sharp, but there's a noticeable visual difference between the a7R3's LCD and the a7 III's LCD. But with that being said, there's also a noticeable difference in battery life. The battery life for both cameras, the a7R3 and the a7 III, is exceptional, especially if you've used older a7R2 cameras like I have. Those batteries in the previous generation of camera, they didn't last long at all. They were small and lightweight, but constantly changing them became cumbersome. And not to mention, I mean, you know, they weren't heavy and they weren't large, but carrying multiples in a backpack or whatever, you know, things get lost and this, that, and the other. With the a7 III, I could comfortably get by an entire day with both stills and video with 2 batteries. The a7R3, I will say there's a noticeable battery life difference, especially when I'm snapping stills. But I can say that it's not a big difference, but it's a big enough difference to where with the a7R3, instead of carrying 2 batteries for an entire day like I do with the a7 III, I will carry 3 batteries for the entire day if I'm using the a7R2, or a7R3, I'm sorry. So, yeah, noticeable battery life difference. Now, one thing I did notice, especially with stills, I mean, yeah, you're getting 42 megapixel, and a lot of people say, why is that important? You know, I don't even... The pollen's out really bad. I don't even need 42 megapixel. Most people don't. But if you're doing landscape type photography and maybe there's an object in the, you know, in a big shot that you want to zoom in on them within post, being able to zoom in on a 42 megapixel versus a 24 megapixel, you're going to be able to retain a lot of that detail. Not that 24 megapixel isn't good, but 42 megapixel is going to give you more quality if you choose to crop in on a certain part of that image within post-production in Lightroom or whatever. So also, beyond the physical canvas size of the photos, I've noticed, especially if you're doing, like when I bust out my 85mm Batis and I'm taking photos of people, you look at the people, the same lens, Batis 85 on an a7 III, and then the same Batis 85 lens on this a7R2, and you're going to notice that the skin tones and just the overall look of that portrait looks higher end. So and that may not be noticeable by everyone, but if you do photography and or videography work every day, like I do, you will probably immediately notice that difference. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference worth mentioning. Now the other thing is, if you're using this heavily for video like I do, I'll go ahead and tell you the a7 III is better. The a7R III, although it does a great job with video, I've noticed that there's a lot of what's referred to as focus breathing. You're probably not noticing it within this video clip because I'm standing still. But what's cool is that in comparison to the previous generation a7R II, this model, the a7R III, is a lot better with that. With my a7R II, I never would have been able to stand in front of the camera like I'm doing now in autofocus and film this without a bunch of wonkiness. And that's something, like if I was moving around right now, and subscribe to my channel, ring that bell, and check out my other a7R III videos. But if I was moving around a lot right now, you would notice that the a7R III does not do as good of a job with video autofocus as the a7 III does. Now that's subject to change because the A9's firmware that just came out is about to release for the a7 III and also the a7R III. So that may improve autofocus drastically, and at that point, once that firmware comes out, there may not be a noticeable difference between the a7R III autofocus for video and the a7 III focus for video. But it is worth mentioning, without getting too technical, if you look at the phase detection points, there's more of those on the a7 III than there is on the a7R III. So at a high level, you've got more little points where it's using for autofocus on the a7 III. So you're going to get, as the product of that, you're going to get better autofocus throughout the frame. But for face-on video segments such as this, I'm in 70mm. Again, expand this video's description, you can find the 24 to 70mm lens that I'm using. But for a face-on video segment like this, and this is at f2.8 aperture, so I'm shooting wide open. But, with a video segment such as this where I'm not moving around, this may be perfectly well suited. The advantage, obviously, to carry an a7R III over an a7 III is that 42 megapixels. So, I may take a shot, and again, it may not be that great, but there may be a certain component within that shot that I want to crop out, and having that 42 megapixel still is an advantage over the 24 megapixel still. But if you're using it for video exclusively, maybe you'll snap a few thumbnails of, products you're reviewing, etc. You may just want to go with the a7 III. And I mean, again, and the a7 III does have better battery life. So, there's a lot of advantages to going to each. But again, just to recap, the a7R III LCD screen, visually superior, but you're getting less battery life. Not noticeably less amount of battery life, but I mean, not an extremely lesser amount of battery life, but it is noticeably less than the battery life I get with the a7 III. Both of them, I don't know if I mentioned this, but both of them have a dual SD card slot. So it's not like if you get the a7 III, you're not really skimping out on anything. The big thing you're getting with a7 III that you're not getting with a7 III is 42 megapixel. So, I mean, it's, again, cameras, it's a matter of the user. What are you looking for? What are your professional needs from a camera? I mean, obviously, when I'm doing, I just had an ant crawling up my leg. When I'm doing product photography and that sort of stuff, I like having the 42 megapixel because I can really zoom in within post, and I may not have to reshoot that product photo. Same with landscape. I do a lot of adventure travel, so if there's something I want to showcase, I may not have to retake the photo because I took it in 42 megapixels. It's huge. So, yeah, just a really good camera. Obviously, from a size and weight perspective, this camera, the a7R III, is a little bit heavier than the a7 III, but as far as the form factor and all of that, it's pretty much identical, except for that little nipple in the middle of the video and photo mode dial. So, not a lot of cosmetic differences. The front says a7R. Does it say 3? I can't see from here, but it has R instead of the a7, which just says a7 III. So, if you're into that and you want to be deemed more professional because you've got the resolution, that's all up to you. But whatever you like, comment below. And if you're looking for these cameras, the microphone like I'm using, the tripod, lenses, any of those accessories, please expand this video's description and then click the link there to find all of the lenses, the camera bodies, the microphone, tripod, And if you don't see it listed, shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to. The best way to message me is on my Facebook page, facebook.com/a7RIII. Shoot me a message and I'll be happy to share a link to whatever product you're looking for, because again, I'm an independent YouTuber. It's videos like this that would not be possible if people didn't choose to support me. So you can support me. You can make your purchases through the link within this video's description. Expand this video's description first and then check the links. You can subscribe. You can ring that bell icon when you do to be notified whenever I post another video. You can choose to support me on Patreon as well. My link to Patreon is within this video's description. Again, all of this is completely optional. The thing that matters the most is that you enjoyed this video, that you've shared it with others, that you've liked it, if you felt it was valuable information. And that's what helps. Again, being an independent YouTuber is a tough hustle. So your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks for your viewership. Be sure to subscribe, ring that bell icon, and check out all my videos. I've got a video playlist full of Sony a7R3 videos, Sony a7 III videos. You can find reviews of all the lenses and a whole lot more there. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, i7RIII here. Thanks again for your viewership. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and ring that bell icon to be notified whenever I post another video. If you're looking for i7RIII's Adventure Channel merch, like this t-shirt and a lot of other cool stuff, expand this video's description. You can find it all there. Y'all have a good day.